all flag changes in 2024. I know of like 2, but I didn't know there was more than that. I mean, obviously the nation of Syria just recently changed their flag, and I believe the Afghanistan flag change happened a couple years ago. I don't think that's going to count in 2024.
2024.
Let's see.
Kyrgyzstan. Let's go back to the end of December 2023.
Right.
Kyrgyzstan redesigned
there
its flag
less,
to strengthen national identity and
rays?
reflect public opinion. The new flag retains its red background, but the sun in the center has been stylized with 40 rays, symbolizing the 40 tribes united by Manas, the legendary hero of Kyrgyz epic tales.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I actually didn't even realize that. Maybe I read that once, but I forgot it clearly. Most of the Wikipedia searches are on it. There still are a couple of old versions with the old, like, wavy blades. This reminds me, I probably need to buy a Kyrgyzstan flag. Or do I have one? I call it Xbox Land. Do you think I would have one? Look at it. It's literally glorious. Oh,
Utah.
you're including states too.
Utah
okay, there's a lot of state
flag
flag
the one
changes.
used since 1913.
Love it. That looks pretty good. This was actually one of the very few U.S. state flag changes that well, not very few. There's one I really don't like. I think it's Minnesota.
Minnesota introduced a new flag, replacing the previous one, which had been criticized for its complexity and similarity.
I do not like at all. I'm sorry, Minnesota, but what the hell? Honestly, you should have just kept the old lame one. Like, what is that? It's hard to take this one seriously flying in the wild. There were some good proposals too. Like, I don't really understand. Well, no, I mean, that's kind of cool.
New flag. Replacing the
May 11th, 2024 is when this occurred.
For its complexity and similarity to other flags.
Yes, I do want to change the other state flag. I mean, maybe I should have like readjusted my statements there because I do hate the state seal flags. But if we're gonna change them, maybe the grass isn't gonna be greener on the other side.
And more modern. Organization of Turkic States. In November 2024, the organization
so we're not just talking about countries here. Really love how this video is titled All Flag Changes. We're not necessarily talking about, like independent nations. This is an organization.
Its flag to emphasize unity and cooperation among Turkic nations.
Turkic
new flag features a common symbol, a golden 8-pointed emblem on a blue background.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Syria. The change of flag in Syria occurred due to the change of regime of Bashar al-Assad.
The fact that he was able to figure out enough flag changes for a minute and a half video is pretty incredible.
As well as the color of the upper
because it's not an easy thing to do. There's usually like
the year 2024 in flags. Right in the comments.
There's usually like one flag change that occurs maybe each year. Well, Kyrgyzstan was the big actual independent one. Syria just changed its flag back to what it looked like from the 50s and 60s. South Sudan changed their flag to a lighter blue back in 2023. Oh, that's right. It was much darker before. I don't know. This kind of blends in with the yellow star now, though. I should just shut up. I'm not one to criticize flags, really. The video is, of course, by Forceman Big World. How every nation reacted to the Russo-Japanese War. This is such a good one because it shocked the world. Japan was not supposed to defeat Russia. Yeah, literally the UK going, whoa!
The Japanese War. The US viewed it with concern as Japan now posed a threat to US interests in the Pacific like the Philippines, Hawaii, and Guam, which led
and they were absolutely right about that. That's exactly what they did next. They went after all that stuff.
That's some minor resentment. The British were pretty stoked since their ally had just beaten their main rival, and it helped alleviate British concerns about Russian aggression. Germany,
oh yeah, I mean, funny enough, there were going to be a lot of people that liked this, especially in Europe.
Also pretty happy and even changed their strategy for the upcoming war to crush France first.
Yes, remember, this is all pre-World War I, so this is still Imperial Germany. Germany, I don't think at that time really knew that they could possibly have an ally like Japan. That was even in their realm of possibilities, because at the time, I don't think they really thought much of Japan until they defeated Russia. Obviously, in World War I, Germany and Japan were not on the same side, but they would in World War II.
First, and then deal with Russia later. Finally, China was understandably terrified since they now had to worry about Japanese expansion even more after Russia was no longer a threat to them, which ended up being totally true.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these fears from countries it literally predicts what would happen like only 2-3 decades later. It was just an absolute monumental event that solidifies an Asian power that industrialized and started doing their own colonialism. That wasn't supposed to happen, especially not to a European. And then not too long after that, this is how large the Japanese Empire would become. This really began the first domino, though. You forgot how the Ottomans were ecstatic about this because they're really close with Japan and their major rival was just defeated. Yeah, so it all depended on like geography, where you lived. If you were in Europe, more than likely you loved it. You loved seeing your rival Russia take a big ol' L. But if you were closer to Japan, you were gonna be a lot more scared. Put the territories in the bag, little bro. Russia, what? USA, bruh. Germany and UK, wow. Meanwhile, China, we're in some deep shit. That video is by History Now. What's the world's largest city? Apparently it's Mongolia? I thought it would be Tokyo.
And you probably think about population in Tokyo. which with a metro population of around 40 million people today is the largest city in the world.
Apparently, you know, with Japan's like population decline, this will not be the case for that much longer.
In terms of the numbers of people there. But it's not the largest city in the world in terms
Probably
of administrative
China or
borders
no,
and territory.
I think India will probably
we
pass
just have
them
to
up
hop over a
eventually.
little bit to the region of Inner Mongolia within China, which includes a city known as Ulaanbaatar. The population of this city is more than 2.5 million people, and a good amount of them all live within the city center that's known as Halar. The difference between this city and other cities, though, is that the city center is just a tiny dot within the whole territory of the city. Ulaanbaatar's city boundaries give it a total land area of nearly 264,000 square kilometers.
That's insane.
Giving the city more land than exists in the entire United Kingdom. And that makes Ulaanbaatar in Inner Mongolia the unexpected answer to the largest city in the world.
That's a very strange one. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of that has to do with population density. There's probably not a whole lot of Chinese citizens that actually live in this area.
At least in terms of land area.
So it's easier to
and with
administrate.
That, don't forget to subscribe for more.
It's easier to administrate like the people up here because just giving them more land, giving the city more land. So weird though. That's not a city. This is a municipality. That's the craziest thing about cities that I'm still kind of figuring out is how everyone has different definitions for what a city is in terms of city borders. Like there's nothing stopping China from doing this. They can just say this massive territory is a giant city and everyone has to just be like, okay, I guess that's the biggest city by land area. This is a good time to remind everyone, this is the LA city map. I literally wish I was kidding, but I am not. For some reason, this is the thing. They wanted to make sure LA got the port of Long Beach, so that is why it looks like this. I know. But this also comes into play when it comes to like, you know, population in certain cities. It all depends on how the nation defines the city and where the city area actually is. But it's just like, dang, I don't know what is the top 10 biggest cities in terms of population. Everyone's different definitions. The concept of city in China is more comparable to like a county, I guess, in the West. In China, I feel like their city borders are more equivalent to prefectures or counties. Yeah, everyone's saying the same thing. They're more like municipalities. It gets really, really confusing when you get into other nations' subdivisions. Obviously, not everyone just does like states. You know, sometimes you call it a county, sometimes you call it a province, sometimes you call it, it's so messy. And I wish we could find like a more simple term that we can all adopt, universal. I think we need to find first what it's to be called a city. This is just a stupid administrative quirk. Tall versus wide civilization players be like, for that big size, I thought the population would be higher. That's exactly why they did it, is because it's not that many. That people don't live up there. You'll see that a lot in like administrative divisions when there's not a lot of people. You give them more land. To continue my California example, the counties with a lot of people in them, they are usually a lot smaller versus the counties where there's not a whole lot. They're bigger. Nice job, real off floor. The real Switzerland of Asia. And it's Bhutan.
Which means that Bhutan ignores the US, Russia, China.
Yes, we've seen this before. Bhutan has a very strange way they recognize other nations, and it's all a big diplomatic thing.
Powerful European nations, and almost
the joke is that they literally don't believe, you know, all these nations exist. That's not exactly how it works, but I mean, on paper, I can see where you can draw that conclusion.
Africa. But what's the actual reason? So initially, Bhutan wants to maintain its
China
neutrality
thing, neutrality.
by not recognizing so many nations. One could call it the real Switzerland of Asia. Secondly, it only recognizes...
it definitely is very similar in terms of geography. It's up here in the mountains, the biggest mountain range, in fact, the Himalayas. It's completely landlocked.
Countries with direct
it's not very large.
Benefits. For example,
it's about the size of
India,
Switzerland,
which has been a real close homie of Bhutan. Most importantly,
real close homie.
Bhutan wants to preserve its unique culture and identity, so it keeps itself isolated to most of the world.
I mean, that's what you gotta do sometimes. Gotta play both sides so you always come out on top. USA, I'm the superpower. Russia, no, I am. Switzerland grabs popcorn. Bhutan, can I have some? I think Bhutan would more likely just ignore all the voices that they hear. They can't acknowledge that other countries exist. USA, I will sanction you. Bhutan, who are you? I'm the real China. No, I'm the real China. What is a China? Bhutan is just a chill guy. At least Poland gets some recognition. That video's by InfoHub. Please go check them out. The USA is bigger than you think. Well, I'm pretty sure I know, but maybe there's going to be a comparison here that would still shock me. Like, I'm still shocked that, like, Australia is bigger than the planet of Pluto, at least one side of it. If you were to, like, wrap out the planet, like, into a flat map so you get both sides, then I don't think this would work as well, but yeah. That also means the USA is bigger than Pluto, but
this is the country,
and we're only talking about the lower 48 states. He's not even including Hawaii and specifically Alaska. That's the biggest state.
9 million people and a GDP of roughly 1 trillion, making it one of the most developed countries.
Yeah, Switzerland's absolutely insane. Their economic power for their size is mind-blowing.
It out and move it somehow over to the US. It fits nicely inside the upper portion of California and Nevada.
Funny enough, I think this comparison just says more about Switzerland than it does the USA. It's amazing that they can be so rich.
Montana, and you get a point. Switzerland fits even without touching the border on any side. If Switzerland were a state, it would rank 42nd, right between West Virginia and Maryland. Do you know what else fits inside?
That's insane. But it would obviously, well, I don't know if it'd make the most money, because California is apparently like the 4th or 5th largest economy if they were to be independent. But if it's like a per capita GDP thing, then yeah.
The US without touching the border, the entire Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
Take a road trip from Lisbon to Tel Aviv, and 60 hours later, you crossed 12 countries.
That's like LA to
here,
Florida, right?
You're still in the same country, except of this little part of Canada, you never left. If you ever hear the phrase, everything is big in America, remember that there is a ton of space to do so.
Yes. I mean, that's why we build our houses so much, so wide, so big. Maybe that's why we also give really big portions, food portions, which makes us fat. Our people are big. This is why people in the USA rarely leave the country. It's gigantic. Most other places are always saying Americans are not cultured enough, but a lot of people just don't have the means to travel that far. Yes, absolutely. Americans don't travel because they can do pretty much everything inside the US. It's unfortunate because I do wish, Americans had a bigger interest in history, because then you do have to go to other parts of the world. Unless you just like American history, then you can stay here. But a lot of other places, a lot of other continents that have way longer history than just the US. I remember when I was young and learned that my drives from Northern California to Southern California was roughly the same mileage as driving across the entire country of France. Driving 6 hours in Europe gets you to another country. Driving 6 hours in Texas gets you in another part of Texas. Dallas alone has 8 million people, one city, nearly all of Switzerland. Interestingly, Brazil is bigger than the 48, but people tend to not see it as massive behemoth it is. Yes, Brazil's a very big country. So is Mexico. Mexico's huge. A lot of places in the New World are big, Australia included. Awesome video, the Switzerland vlog. Which country has lost the most territory? And this video is called, and I thought the answer would be Germany. As you can see, the first couple frames is the German Empire at one point. So which country has lost the most territory in the world? Like, I'm guessing we're not just talking about in Europe. Well, would it not just be the British Empire? They were the world's largest empire, and now they're basically just their island. They still have a couple overseas territories, but it doesn't contribute much to their overall size. Or would it be Mongolia? I bet you it's one of those two.
History. Most people would be quick to say something like one of the major European empires, think the British, the Portuguese, the French. But this question is actually a little bit more complicated than that. If we're just talking about...
what do we... Yeah, there we go. But let's talk about defining it. That's right. If you're talking about really small nations that still exist today versus where they were before, I mean, Austria is a lot smaller than when they were Austria-Hungary.
But this question is actually a little bit more complicated than that. If we're just talking about the sheer amount of land area lost, then yeah, the British easily take the cake with this one. In fact, their massive empire just a little over 100 years ago encompassed more than a quarter of the entire world's landmass.
Yes.
Comparing that to the land they control today, you can see that they've lost over 13.6 million square miles.
Yeah, not shocked by that.
More than any other country in the world. But if we look in...
Are we looking at like percentages maybe? Or based off of... I don't know.
In terms of percentages, the British only lost 99.3% of their land, which might seem like a lot, but there are countries that have lost even more.
Interesting. Oh man. So the answer is the Vatican City. I was trying to think of a micronation, but I know Monaco hadn't got that big. Liechtenstein, Andorra. I thought San Marino. Maybe you could argue. I don't really know. The answer is the Pope.
1700s,
yeah, because the Pope got
to
pretty
control
big.
a good chunk of modern-day Italy.
I probably should have been able to figure this out. Now the Vatican City is obviously considered the smallest country in the world.
However,
but
over
they
the
had
span of the next few centuries, their borders would find themselves shrinking smaller and smaller until we reach today. You see, the modern-day papal states, now known as the Vatican City, control only a land area of 0.17 square miles, meaning in total they've lost 99.999% of their territory, more than any other country.
This is a great video. Hungary lost 2/3 of its land in 1920. I thought it was the Mongolian Empire. Mongolia is still relatively big. Obviously, they still lost a ton of their land, but they still control over 500,000 square miles. They don't have all that many people living in Mongolia, but the actual land that they consider Mongolia, it's still massive. Wouldn't it be a country that no longer exists? That's a great question. I thought that's what this video was going to do. It was going to be like a trick question. I'm glad that it wasn't though. Sovereign Military Order of Malta lost 100% of their land. That 100% germ after using sanitizer. Oh yeah, because it kills 99.9% of germs. By that logic, we can say like the country of Tibet lost 100% of their land area as it doesn't exist now. Nice video, Reschultz Geo. Here's another one by him. This island is split between three different countries. There's the island of Borneo. Mostly it's Indonesian territory, but there's also Malaysia and then the independent nation of Brunei. Historically speaking, the islands of Indonesia were very split up. It wasn't until the Europeans got over there, started colonizing them, putting all the stuff together.
This is the island of Borneo, the only place on Earth where you'll find three countries all congregated on one island. And to understand
it's very interesting because Borneo just borders Malaysia. It gets even more interesting when you consider the Malaysian borders. Malaysia is on Borneo, and then they're on the mainland continent of Asia as well. Then to top it all off, they kicked out Singapore, so they don't have this small little city, but apparently this part of Malaysia is not doing quite as good as this part, unsurprisingly. But let's see exactly what he says.
To understand how Indonesia, Malaysia, and Little Brunei ended up in this situation, we need to travel all the way back to the 1600s. This was a time period when the Netherlands
Dutch are going to be here.
Done being
the Dutch and then the British, because British had British Malay.
A tiny little European country. Now they wanted to go global. You see, their Dutch East India Company began slowly establishing its influence in Southeast Asia by trading things like pepper, gold, and diamonds. By the end of the next century, they'd essentially gained control over this entire region. Unfortunately for the Dutch, this period of uncontested influence wouldn't last long because the British also wanted a piece of this territory. And with their much more powerful navy, that's exactly what they got. At this point, you have an island split between both Britain and the Netherlands, and slowly the people of Borneo themselves were getting increasingly tired of these colonial rulers. Eventually, both empires were forced to grant these countries.
Pretty much the story of everyone around the world. Get European colonizers in your backyard, you'd be like, yo, can you leave?
In the case of North Borneo, most of the regions decided to join the new country of Malaysia. Brunei, however, who had been invited to join the Union, instead opted to continue its time as a British protectorate, which leads us to the borders we see on the map today.
Wow. I absolutely love these geography stories about smaller things, you know, like obviously when it comes to geography content on YouTube or TikTok or anywhere, you know, we hit the main stuff like the true size of the whatever Soviet Union or the USA, how big are these places, or, you know, just population density maps. That's a really popular, you know, geography content here. But the story of like I love this stuff. Geography is so interesting too because there's so many crazy stories to talk about all around the world. I was just watching this video in my recommendations about why a certain small city in the Pacific Northwest didn't become a major city. This got 1 million views in 3 days. Like, this is definitely a lesser known geography story, yet there's still so many other things to talk about. And it seems like there's a lot of interest in talking about some of the lesser known topics. And I really like this example because, I mean, I've always looked at maps, but I never really asked myself, I wonder how this island got divided into 3 different countries. I think you'll find that Great Britain has 3 countries locked together on an island. Oh, England, Scotland, Wales. The Dutch and the British love islands, especially in Oceania. They like islands in general. Funny how Malaysia not only has one coastal offshoot that is not a part of their country, not just Singapore, but also Brunei on their 2 different parts. It's like South Africa having 2 different landlocked nations inside of it. Go check out all these channels. And a big old thanks to my patrons. I stole Drew Durnil's Robux and won't return them until he plays Cartwright into Drew Durnil.
Alexander
Drew's
the
Argentinian Grandpa.
I'm back, boys.
aPhatNarwhal.
Connor
I will literally revive
DOOCHBAGGINS,
Fredrik Tibblin realize Imperial Japan flag is the same as modern Japan
NordTyrol,
flag.
Tambre,
the Mexican 760,
and ZaneyBoi.